Johnny Carson, the undisputed king of late night, was known for his charm and easygoing nature. But in 1982, one guest's over-the-top antics pushed him too far. Rumor has it, Carson banned the guest for good after an embarrassing incident. Let's dive into the story behind the guest. Johnny simply couldn't stand. The early life of Johnny Carson. Long before Johnny Carson became the legendary host of The Tonight Show, he was just a boy from the Midwest, captivated by the world of magic. Born in 1925 in Corning, Iowa, Carson's fascination with performing began at age 12, when he eagerly ordered a magician's kit from a mail-order catalog. From the moment he opened the box, he was hooked. Hours were spent perfecting tricks. Sleight of hand, misdirection, and showmanship became his specialties. Soon, young Carson was performing as the Great Carson, dazzling family and friends with his illusions, his natural charm already beginning to shine through. Magic didn't just entertain him, it helped Carson connect with people, giving the shy boy an outlet to step out of his shell. The applause and awe from his small audiences fueled his desire to perform, sparking dreams of something bigger. But as his love for magic grew, life took a detour when he enlisted in the U.S. Navy during World War II. Even then, Carson kept magic close, performing for fellow sailors. His big moment came when he entertained Navy Secretary James Forrestal with his tricks, a high-profile performance that made Carson realize his talent could take him far. After the war, Carson pursued higher education, graduating from the University of Nebraska in 1949 with degrees in journalism and broadcasting. Although his studies prepared him for a career in media, Carson never abandoned his magic. He soon moved to Los Angeles, where he worked as a comedy writer for the Red Skelton Show in the early 1950s. Along the way, he competed in amateur magic contests, winning trophies he proudly displayed for the rest of his life. In 1962, Carson's career reached a turning point when NBC selected him to replace Jack Paar as the host of The Tonight Show. Though he was less experienced than other contenders, Carson's on-screen test revealed the same magnetic charm that had wowed audiences since his magic days. As host, he brought a fresh and witty edge to late-night TV. His monologues became must-watch, with clever, timely humor that resonated with viewers. Celebrities loved his laid-back style, enjoying interviews with Carson's quick wit and authentic curiosity. Despite his rise to fame, Carson never forgot his roots as a magician. He often brought magic into his comedy sketches, including the iconic Karnak the Magnificent bit, where he donned a jeweled turban and predicted humorous answers to unseen questions. The sketches, infused with Carson's early fascination with illusion and showmanship, became fan favorites. His playful tricks with sidekick Ed McMahon often went hilariously wrong, showcasing Carson's ability to laugh at himself. Carson's love for magic stayed with him throughout his career. He invited renowned magicians like Doug Henning onto the show, always asking them to perform for his personal enjoyment. Even after becoming a late-night icon, Carson's childlike wonder for magic never dimmed. Seeing him perform or talk about magic was like watching a kid again, proof that for Johnny Carson, the spark that started with a magician's kit never truly faded. Carson's turbulent marriages and poor parenting, Johnny Carson, the quintessential late-night icon, dazzled audiences with his effortless charm and quick wit on The Tonight Show. Yet beneath the glitz and glamour of his television persona, Carson's private life was a turbulent sea of heartbreak and conflict. His captivating presence on screen masked a reality that was often fraught with emotional turmoil and personal strife. Carson's journey into matrimony began in 1948 when he wed Jody Wolcott, a relationship that started while he was still a student at the University of Nebraska. As Carson's broadcasting career took off, so did his obsession with his work, leading him to spend increasing amounts of time away from home. Jody, feeling abandoned and isolated, expressed her frustrations, but Carson's relentless drive for success left little room for their marriage. The couple's relationship was further strained by infidelities. Jody reportedly had a long-standing affair with football star Frank Gifford, while rumors swirled about Carson's own indiscretions. After 13 years of a fractured union, their marriage ended in 1963, leaving behind a tangled mess of unresolved feelings and bitterness. Undeterred, Carson quickly moved on. Just 6 months after his divorce from Jody, he married Joanne Copeland, a former model and flight attendant. Their romance, sparked years earlier, seemed promising. However, their marriage was plagued by explosive arguments and deep emotional rifts. Copeland later revealed that Carson could be particularly harsh during their disputes, delivering cutting remarks that left deep scars. The marriage, marked by constant conflict, finally ended in 1972 after 9 years. The divorce was highly publicized, with Copeland walking away with a substantial settlement of nearly $500,000. Carson's love life took another turn when he married Joanna Holland in September 1972, just days after his split from Copeland. Holland, a fashion model turned businesswoman, seemed to bring stability to Carson's life. But as time wore on, rumors of infidelity and dissatisfaction surfaced, revealing cracks in their seemingly solid relationship. After a decade of marriage, their union fell apart, culminating in another expensive divorce. Holland received a staggering $20 million, and Carson, growing increasingly cynical, dismissed marriage as an expensive racket. Despite his growing skepticism, Carson found love once more in the mid-1980s when he met Alexis Moss, a woman 26 years his junior. Moss, an interior designer and socialite, was elegant and intelligent, quickly capturing Carson's heart. Hoping that this fourth marriage would break the pattern of failure, Carson proposed to Moss in 1987 when he was 62 and she was 36. Their wedding was a grand affair, held by the seaside in Malibu and attended by Hollywood's elite, a testament to Carson's enduring status as television royalty. For once, Carson's fourth marriage seemed to thrive. Moss brought a sense of peace and companionship that Carson had longed for, and their relationship remained stable until Carson's death in 2005. Moss, preferring to stay out of the limelight, never remarried and quietly preserved the memories of their life together. Yet Carson's troubled personal life often overshadowed his role as a father, especially in his relationship with his 3 sons from his marriage to Jody Wolcott. Despite their divorce, Carson remained distant from his children, focusing more on his career than on family matters. His second-born son, Rick, particularly felt the sting of this emotional neglect. Rick, struggling with alcoholism and mental health issues during his time in the Navy, faced a tragic turning point in June 1991. While hospitalized in New York, Carson did not visit him, a stark reflection of their strained relationship. Rick, attempting to carve out his own path in television, worked as a production assistant on Tom Snyder's Tomorrow and eventually became a stage manager and associate director. However, securing steady work proved difficult after the show ended. Rick's passion for photography, especially landscape and nature shots, offered him solace but also led to tragedy. He died in a single-car accident on Highway 1 near the Pacific coast. The police report suggested that Rick might have been distracted while photographing, as camera equipment was found at the scene. Rick's sudden death devastated Johnny Carson, who took a month-long hiatus from The Tonight Show to grieve. When he returned, he delivered a heartfelt tribute to Rick, describing his son's infectious laugh and their supposed close relationship. Carson spoke emotionally about how Rick's death had underscored the importance of family, but the reality of their bond was more complex. Biographer Lawrence Leamer, in his book King of the Night, painted a picture of a distant and emotionally estranged relationship between Carson and Rick. Despite public statements to the contrary, Carson's connection with Rick was marked by miscommunication and detachment. Rick, often seen as the rebellious son, struggled under the shadow of his famous father. According to Leamer, Rick felt deeply hurt by Carson's emotional distance, particularly when Carson failed to attend his early performances. Rick's former girlfriend revealed that he carried a profound sense of rejection due to his father's aloofness. Even as Carson publicly mourned his son's death and extolled their relationship, it's evident that their bond was fraught with unresolved issues. Their shared paths in the entertainment industry were marred by personal estrangement, reflecting a life of triumph and tragedy. Johnny Carson's reign as the king of late-night television was marked by professional success, but his personal life, marked by failed marriages and strained familial relationships, tells a much more sorrowful and intricate story. His mysterious off-screen persona. Before we delve into the guest who pushed Johnny Carson's patience to the limit, let's unravel the mystery of the man behind the iconic late-night persona. On television, Johnny Carson radiated a warmth and approachability that made him seem like America's best friend, ready to share a laugh after a long day. Yet off-camera, the reality was starkly different. Carson, known for his effortless charm and quick wit, was actually a painfully shy and awkward figure who found solace in solitude rather than social interaction. This sharp contrast between his public persona and private demeanor only deepened the intrigue surrounding him. Dick Cavett, a friend and fellow talk show host, painted a vivid picture of Carson's off-screen persona. According to Cavett, Carson struggled with casual conversation and was notably uncomfortable in social settings once the cameras were off. Despite his on-screen success and the adoration of millions, Carson was often caught off guard by well-meaning fans who cornered him backstage after tapings. Cavett described Carson as a classic introvert, someone who recharged alone and found social interactions draining. Andrew Nichols, Carson's head writer during the late 80s and early 90s, concurred with Cavett's assessment. Nichols portrayed Carson as a man who thrived in solitude and found the buzz of social environments exhausting. While Carson commanded the stage during The Tonight Show, he eagerly sought the peace of his own company once the show was over. Nichols recalled how, after each broadcast, Carson would visibly relax, getting into his car and driving home alone, often enjoying the soothing strains of jazz music. Nichols summed up Carson's social habits succinctly. He didn't socialize much. He saved his energy for performance. Carson himself acknowledged this divide in a rare 1979 interview with Mike Wallace on 60 Minutes. Carson explained the duality of his life, the confident performer on stage and the reserved individual off it. He admitted to Wallace that he was probably more shy than aloof in his youth, finding comfort in the controlled environment of his public persona. Carson's public persona was his sanctuary, a place where he could exert control and command attention with ease. In contrast, social interactions that made him uneasy were avoided. Professionally, Carson was a perfectionist, meticulously overseeing every aspect of his show for nearly 30 years. He personally approved all guest appearances, reviewed sketches, and fine-tuned his nightly monologue with exacting attention to detail. His daily routine was a well-oiled machine. Mornings spent poring over newspapers and magazines for material, lunch precisely at 1 p.m. with his cook, and a solitary drive to NBC studios to prepare for the evening show. Even outside of work, Carson adhered to a strict regimen. His dedication to tennis provided a therapeutic outlet for his frustrations, while his burgeoning interest in drumming offered another form of emotional release. Carson humorously described drumming as a way to beat something, suggesting to Wallace that it might help with Mike's own frustrations. Carson had his own struggles with anger issues and confessed that alcohol exacerbated his worst tendencies. Recognizing that drinking brought out his more unpleasant side, he ultimately chose to give it up. Carson was also famously private about his Midwestern upbringing, which taught him that discussing money and salaries was impolite. He skillfully deflected questions about his income and lavish lifestyle, believing such topics were inappropriate. As he told Wallace, discussing someone's earnings or the cost of items was considered impolite in his hometown, fostering a reluctance to divulge personal details. This background instilled in Carson a sense that sharing personal information was improper. Even in his romantic relationships, Carson remained intensely private. His lawyer, Robert Shapiro, once commented that although he was a close friend, he had little insight into Carson's personal life, highlighting how even those closest to him struggled to truly understand him. Despite his 4 marriages, Carson rarely discussed his relationships, divorces, or personal feelings. For 3 decades, as he welcomed stars into America's living rooms, he remained an enigmatic figure, one who fully came alive only during the 2-hour spectacle he orchestrated each night at NBC Studios. Conflicts with fellow entertainers. Now that we know Johnny Carson as the charismatic host of The Tonight Show, it's clear that not all was smooth sailing behind the scenes. Despite his effortless charm and quick-witted banter, Carson's interactions with some fellow entertainers were far from harmonious. Take comedian Bob Hope, for example, a frequent visitor to Carson's show who, despite his star power, managed to irk Carson to no end. Hope was a fixture on The Tonight Show, often appearing to promote his latest projects. Richard Glenn's 2014 biography, Hope, Entertainer of the Century, sheds light on Carson's private disdain for Hope's visits. While Hope's regular appearances were great for ratings, Carson found them repetitive and dull. Hope's reliance on well-worn jokes and predictable gags grated on Carson, who preferred engaging, spontaneous conversation. This underlying tension reflected a deeper rivalry between the two men. Hope, a primetime titan since the 1950s, had a commanding presence at NBC, and Carson, though a reigning late-night host, had to navigate the network's power dynamics carefully. Producer Peter Lassily vividly recalls Carson's frustration with Hope's incessant requests for appearances. Whenever Hope's name came up, Lassally remembers Carson's reluctance to turn him down, even when he was clearly exasperated. "We'd get a request, and Johnny would go again, and I'd say, 'Do you want to tell him no?' And he'd say, 'No, you can't turn down Bob Hope,'" Lassily recounted, highlighting the strained dynamic between the two. Hope's later years only intensified the strain. As Hope's health declined, his appearances became increasingly difficult for Carson to endure. According to Zoglin, Hope struggled with diminishing hearing and eyesight, making it harder for him to respond to Carson's questions. Carson's frustration reached a peak, with the host openly lamenting Hope's refusal to retire gracefully. Carson even told a writer he would prefer drastic measures rather than end up like Hope, revealing his deep-seated dissatisfaction with the situation. Another fraught relationship was with Joan Rivers. Rivers, who owed much of her early success to Carson's support in the 1960s, felt the sting of betrayal when she left The Tonight Show to host her own show on Fox in 1986. Rivers revealed in later years that she had called Carson personally to inform him of her departure, only to be met with a furious hang-up. In a 2012 essay, Rivers speculated that Carson's anger was driven by a sense of sexism. He might have expected her to remain loyal, simply because she was a woman he had helped early in her career. Rivers felt that Carson's reaction was a reflection of an outdated patriarchal mindset, where female comedians were presumed to owe eternal loyalty to their benefactors. The fallout from her departure led to Rivers being blacklisted from NBC's late-night shows, a claim she made with evident pain. It wasn't until Jimmy Fallon's tenure in 2014 that Rivers returned to The Tonight Show, ending a 26-year hiatus. This long absence underscored Carson's uncompromising nature towards those he felt had crossed him. Carson's distaste for certain guests extended to comedian Charlie Callis, whose frenetic energy and zany physical comedy once charmed audiences. Callis was a staple on Carson's show in the 1960s and 70s, known for his exaggerated facial expressions and sound effects. However, by 1982, Carson had grown weary of Callis's predictable shtick. An insider revealed that Carson found Callis's act stale and gimmicky, preferring guests who engaged in more authentic conversation. The tension came to a head during Callis's 1982 appearance. Callis's routine, filled with the very traits Carson found tiresome, silly voices, exaggerated antics, and cliched punchlines, was met with open disdain. Carson mocked Callis's performance with a bomb sound effect, signaling his displeasure. When Callis playfully shoved Carson as part of his act, Carson's irritation boiled over. He told Callis in no uncertain terms that he would never appear on the show again. Despite Callis's attempts to plead for another chance, Carson's decision was final. Callis's removal from the show was a blow to his career, which continued, but without the significant platform of Carson's show. Carson's bitterness was so profound that he instructed his staff to avoid any mention of Callis. The reasons for Carson's animosity remain partly speculative. Some suggest it stemmed from jealousy over Callis's ties with Mel Brooks, while others believe it was due to Callis's perceived lack of respect for Carson's status. Regardless, Carson considered Callis's persona unfit for his show and erased him from its history. Years later, a review of The Tonight Show tapes confirmed the basic facts of the 1982 incident. Callis's performance faltered, Carson mocked him, and Callis's playful shove was met with Carson's stern response. Contrary to some claims, Callis did appear on the show with guest hosts a few more times, but his direct appearances with Carson ended with that infamous show. The complexities of Carson's relationships with his guests reveal the often hidden strains behind his public persona of affable charm. Johnny Carson's on-screen brilliance dazzled millions. But behind the curtains lay a labyrinth of tumultuous relationships, personal battles, and unspoken rivalries. His life off-camera was as dramatic as the show he masterfully hosted, revealing a man whose charisma could not always mask the storms within.